Welcome to The Debate. Imagine spending trillions of dollars on a plan that everyone absolutely hates.
Right. A plan that never actually works.
Exactly. A plan that gets you universally condemned as a monster. But, now imagine that 200 years later, that exact quote-unquote failed plan is the only reason the human race isn't extinct.
It sounds like a bad movie plot, honestly.
Right? But I'm taking the advocate position today because I've been looking at the historical archives of the Trisolaran crisis, specifically the Wallfacer Project. And I keep coming back to this really uncomfortable paradox. Humanity's greatest survival tools were born directly from our absolute worst, most disastrous mistakes.
Well, I'm the dissenter today. And I think you're giving historical madmen way, way too much credit.
I probably am. But I argue that these monumental failures fundamentally built the physical and, the psychological infrastructure of our survival.
And I will be arguing that framing these absolute disasters as, beneficial failures is a really dangerous kind of revisionist history.
Dangerous how?
Because you're taking a string of incredibly lucky historical accidents and dressing them up as strategic brilliance. Evaluating a terrible plan based solely on its accidental utility centuries later, that completely ignores the catastrophic danger and the moral abhorrence of the original intent.
It is a profound historical tension, though, isn't it? I mean, in a war spanning 400 years, the very definition of success shifts right beneath our feet.
Sure, the goalposts move.
Exactly. And the Wallfacers were basically meditators, right? They had to work entirely within the confines of their own minds to deceive a telepathic enemy.
A telepathic enemy that could literally see everything else they did.
Right. So I genuinely believe their true legacy wasn't their specific strategic plans. Let's face it, almost all of those failed spectacularly.
Spectacularly is putting it mildly.
Fair enough. But their legacy was the time and the tools they bought for future generations.
But did they actually buy time, or did they just waste precious resources? I mean, let's look at the actual mechanisms here. You're talking about technological path dependence.
Which means what exactly in this context?
The idea that we somehow had to go through these phenomenally bad ideas to get to the good ones.
Yes, exactly. I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. Acknowledging the horrific nature of the original plans doesn't negate their absolute, undeniable, long-term utility.
I still say it's a massive stretch.
Well, think of it this way. They built the staircase we eventually climbed. Let's look at the physical infrastructure left behind.
Okay, let's.
Take your prime example of madness, the second Wallfacer, Manuel Ray Diaz.
Oh, the guy who wanted to blow up the solar system? Great example.
Right. We all know his deranged secret plan to hold Earth hostage. He wanted to detonate 1 million stellar-class hydrogen bombs on Mercury, decelerate the planet, and crash it into the sun.
Which is a plan that humanity rightfully condemned as a crime against life itself. He was literally stoned to death by his own people.
Absolutely. It was horrific. But look at what his bomb complex actually yielded. It forced the development of massive stellar-class nuclear weapons.
Weapons we didn't need at the time.
But weapons we needed later. Centuries later, Lou G literally recycled Diaz's exact bombs for the Snow Project.
He used the leftovers, sure.
He wrapped those leftover bombs in an oil film, used them to create dust clouds to make the sun flicker, and broadcast Trisolaran' coordinates to the universe. That established dark forest deterrence.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You were completely ignoring the physical reality of Diaz's plan to focus on a serendipitous byproduct.
How am I ignoring the reality?
Because Diaz's plan wouldn't even have worked. Mercury is simply too far from the sun for a deceleration of that magnitude to be feasible.
Well, the math was...
And more importantly, humanity couldn't mine enough fissionable material to make the 1 million bombs he wanted. The ocean's protium, deuterium, and tritium reserves couldn't support it.
But that is exactly my point. He demanded the impossible, which forced humanity's engineering capabilities into absolute overdrive.
It wasn't overdrive. It was a suicidal Hail Mary that only threatened Earth. It wasn't true deterrence at all.
But it laid the groundwork.
Lou G's later deterrence actually threatened the Trisolaran homeworld. Diaz was basically throwing a temper tantrum, threatening to flip the game board so the Trisolarians couldn't have it.
Okay, but you can't deny that Luigi used the leftover bombs.
Yes, he used them, but building a massive stockpile of useless, primitive weapons that someone else figures out how to use hundreds of years later doesn't make you a strategic genius. It makes you a hoarder who got incredibly lucky.
Is it just luck, though? This is the core of the Wallfacer paradox. The Trisolarans only feared what they couldn't see.
Right, the hidden thoughts in Luigi's mind.
Exactly. But the things they could see, the things they explicitly dismissed, like Diaz's bombs, became the exact tools humanity used to beat them.
Because they didn't think we were crazy enough to actually use them.
In the Dark Forest, only completely illogical, ego-driven madness could secure that kind of funding and infrastructure without raising Trisolaran suspicion.
So wait, we're praising ego-driven madness now? Think about the opportunity cost here. If Diaz hadn't monopolized global industry to build useless bombs, humanity might have funded actual warp drive research or advanced material science much earlier.
But they wouldn't have, and we know they wouldn't have, because the Federation actively suppressed that kind of research later on.
They suppressed it for different reasons, though.
Regardless, it brings me to my next point about Diaz. It wasn't just the bombs he left behind. It was the Mercury base itself.
You mean the suicide cave?
Call it what you want, but he insisted on excavating ultra-deep shafts into the rock of Mercury to test his weapons.
Because he was paranoid and wanted to hide from the sun?
Yes, he spent enormous resources digging into a miraculously hard layer of metal and rock to create this final bastion. Now fast forward to the bunker era.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Isn't it an undeniable fact that Thomas Wade's secret research base for light-speed curvature propulsion was built exactly inside Diaz's excavated shafts on Mercury?
Yes, Wade used the crater, I'll give you that. But again, you are conflating the existence of a hole in the ground with the genius of light-speed physics.
I'm not crediting Diaz with the physics.
It sounds like you are.
No. I'm crediting the Wallfacer mandate with forcing the creation of infrastructure that would otherwise never have been approved.
Because the Federation had banned curvature propulsion research.
Exactly. Wade needed a place completely hidden from the rest of the solar system, heavily shielded and isolated. Diaz's failure literally housed humanity's ultimate escape.
It was a convenient real estate grab, nothing more.
Let me offer an analogy. Imagine building a massive, failed monument today, a total boondoggle, just so someone can secretly launch a starship from it tomorrow.
That's a fun analogy, but
Could anyone else have dug that hole under Safon's surveillance without being stopped? Only a Wallfacer's blank check of madness could do it.
look, Wade didn't need Diaz to be a madman. Wade just needed a hole.
A very specific, very expensive hole.
Sure, but Diaz dug that hole because he had an irrational phobia of the sun and wanted to hide from it while trying to build an impossible doomsday device.
Right, his motives were flawed.
Wade used the hole because the Federation government was turning a blind eye to small-scale research out there. To credit Diaz with the development of curvature propulsion is like crediting the dinosaurs with the invention of the combustion engine because they happened to die and turn into oil.
Oh, wow. That is quite the comparison.
It's a massive leap of logic.
I think you're underestimating how restrictive the environment was. But okay, if you won't give the Wallfacers credit for the physical hardware, let's shift gears.
Please, let's.
Let's move from the physical infrastructure of Diaz to the psychological infrastructure left by the third Wallfacer, Bill Hines.
Oh, here we go, the mental seal.
Exactly. Because the real bottleneck for humanity wasn't technology, it was psychology. Hines publicly sought to upgrade human intelligence.
But we all know he secretly developed the mental seal instead, a machine that literally imprinted absolute, unshakable belief into the brain.
Yes. He told the world he was imprinting triumphalism, a total faith in human victory. But in reality, he changed a single line of code.
To imprint absolute defeatism and escapism into the military.
Exactly. And
it was a complete and utter disaster, a totalitarian nightmare.
was it though?
Yes, Hines failed to make everyone run. Instead, he just caused massive paranoia. When the existence of these imprinted soldiers was discovered centuries later, the space fleet faced a total crisis of trust.
Which is exactly what needed to happen.
Wait, really? Paralyzing your own military is what needed to happen?
Yes, because they were too confident.
They had no idea who in their ranks was a secret defeatist, waiting to hijack a ship and flee. It ground the fleet's entire command structure to an absolute halt.
I know. It was incredible.
It was the dark forest theory playing out on a microscale between human beings. Once you can't trust the mind of the person next to you, cooperation collapses.
Yes, it triggered the imprinted panic. But look at the fleet's solution to that panic. How did they actually solve the bottleneck?
By finding people who hadn't been near the machine.
Exactly. To ensure their most advanced ships were not commanded by secret defeatists, they deliberately turned to officers who had been in hibernation since before the mental seal was invented.
Right, the Common Era officers, like Zhang Beihai.
Precisely. This panic directly led the Asian fleet to choose Zhang Beihai to command the natural selection. And what did Zhang Beihai do?
He stole the ship.
He immediately hijacked the ship and fled the solar system, preserving the only seed of human civilization to survive the dark forest strike.
That's true, but
Think about the causality here. Heinz built a lock of paranoia that only one specific key could fit.
the key?
Without the panic Heinz caused, would a Common Era officer ever have been handed the override codes to humanity's most advanced warship? Didn't Heinz's failure force the one man who could run right into the driver's seat?
The irony there is so thick you could choke on it. I mean, think about what you're actually saying.
I am thinking about it. It makes perfect sense.
Zhang Beihai was a natural defeatist. He didn't even use the mental seal.
Right, his belief was genuine.
He and his father had independently concluded centuries earlier that humanity's Stone Age tech couldn't beat the Trisolaranans. Zhang Beihai spent centuries faking a triumphalist attitude.
He was incredibly dedicated.
He even murdered scientists in space with meteorites to ensure the development of the radiation drive technology necessary for interstellar escape.
Which just proves my point about needing to break the rules to survive.
No, it proves that individual agency matters more than broken systems. Zhang Beihai acted entirely on his own free will.
But he needed the opportunity.
He was chosen to command natural selection specifically to act as a firewall against Heinz's imprinted soldiers.
Exactly.
To say Heinz's plan was a success because it accidentally put the ultimate unbrainwashed escapist in charge is a massive stretch. Heinz deserves zero credit for Zhang Beihai's incredible willpower and foresight. Zhang Beihai is the true hero here. If anyone is the ultimate unofficial Wallfacer, it's him.
Look, I don't disagree that Zhang Beihai is a hero. I really don't. But history isn't just about lone heroes acting in a vacuum, you know? It's about the systems that allow heroes to act. The Wallfacer Project was a massive systemic disruption.
A disruption? Yes. A helpful one? Debatable.
Heinz's psychological failure became a strategic success precisely because it disrupted the complacency of the fleet.
The fleet was complacent because they thought they had matched Trisolarian technology.
Exactly. They thought they had won. They thought the Trisolarians were surrendering. They were completely asleep at the wheel.
So Heinz woke them up by breaking their brains.
Heinz's legacy was the injection of a chaotic variable that the Trisolarians couldn't predict. The Sophons couldn't read minds, right?
Right.
And they couldn't predict how a 200-year-old structural paranoia would intersect with a 200-year-old sleeper agent like Zhang Beihai.
I guess that's true.
Did the system create the hero by forcing a bottleneck, or did the hero just exploit a broken system? I argue you really can't separate the two.
It's a fascinating narrative, I'll admit, but it requires us to completely divorce the outcome from the intent.
Intent doesn't matter when you're facing extinction.
Of course it matters. Heinz wanted a massive, brainwashed cult of escapists. What he got was a military tribunal and a few isolated ships running for their lives under the command of a man who despised everything the mental seal stood for.
But they ran. That's the point.
The danger of your beneficial failure framework is that it excuses the horrific ethical violations of these men. Heinz violated the fundamental freedom of thought. Diaz violated the fundamental right to life.
Well, let's bring these physical and psychological threads together then, because the ultimate legacy of early deterrence-era technology forces us to question if a plan can be successful if the technology works, but the strategy fails.
Okay, how do you mean?
Look at the first Wallfacer, Frederick Tyler.
The mosquito fleet guy?
Right. His plan was a double cross involving a mosquito fleet of kamikaze space fighters and a water gift to the Trisolarian fleet.
And it was broken almost immediately.
It was. His direct military application was absolute zero, but his project required intensive resource reconnaissance of water-bearing bodies like Europa and Ceres,
Which is standard science.
and the development of miniaturized hibernation units for his pilots. That failed research provided the core technical data that supported the large-scale space construction and long-term hibernation needs of the later deterrence era.
Okay, but again, you're giving Tyler credit for standard scientific progression.
It wasn't standard, though. It was heavily accelerated. The Snow Project itself, the very thing that established dark forest deterrence and saved Earth, was a mosaic of these failures.
A mosaic.
Think about it. You have Diaz's Stella bombs, you have Tyler's orbital research and hibernation tech, which allowed Liu Ji to wait out the centuries, and you have Liu Ji's sociological theory. It is a mosaic.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered the incredibly destructive consequences of glorifying this kind of technological sprint?
Destructive how? We survived.
You frame these early Wallfacer efforts as primitive but vital stepping stones, but advanced technology without moral constraint or proper intent nearly tore humanity apart.
I mean, we were already being torn apart. Give me an example.
Look at the curvature propulsion research at Wade's Mercury base, the one you were just praising earlier.
Yes, Wade's base.
Yes, it eventually gave Chengxin a lightspeed ship, but the research itself left spatial trails, reduced lightspeed wakes.
Right, the trails.
Those trails risked exposing Earth's exact location to the dark forest.
But those trails were also the key to the Black Domain Plan. They were a safety announcement to the universe if used correctly.
If used correctly.
It proved that lowering the speed of light could create a cosmic safety zone.
But they didn't know that initially. Wade's ruthless, unregulated sprint toward light speed prioritized experimental physics over any theoretical understanding of the consequences.
They were under a time crunch.
They were moving matter at light speed and ignoring the fact that quantum computers nearby were failing because the speed of light was being permanently altered in their wake. They were literally damaging the fabric of space-time in the solar system.
So, they were moving fast and breaking things. Literally.
Breaking the laws of physics in your own backyard isn't a Silicon Valley startup metric. It's an existential threat.
Well,
This is exactly why Chengxin and the Federation government eventually had to step in and try to regulate it. When you separate the genius of the tool from the madness of the inventor, you end up with tools that are inherently dangerous.
I hear you. But I frame the early Wallfacer efforts as Stone Age axes.
Stone Age axes?
Yeah. To the Trisolarians, they were practically useless. They looked at Tyler's mosquito fleet, Diaz's heavy bombs, and Heinz's crude brain scanner, and they felt nothing but contempt.
Because they were practically useless against the droplets.
Right. But in a war spanning 400 years, the Trisolarian paradox proves true.
Which is?
The things they could see, the things they allowed humanity to develop, because they dismissed them as primitive failures, became the exact components of their own defeat.
Survivorship bias, pure and simple.
I don't think it is. You can't separate the mosaic. You can't have Liu Ji's deterrent without Dizaz's bombs providing the explosive yield.
You might have found another way.
But we didn't. And you can't have galactic humanity without Heinz's panic putting Zhang Beihai on that specific ship at that specific time. The madness of the inventor simply doesn't invalidate the utility of the tool.
It invalidates the praise we give the inventor, though. We should praise the opportunists.
The opportunists?
Yes, the later generations who looked at this junkyard of megalomaniacal projects and managed to cobble together a survival mechanism.
That's part of it, sure.
Liu Ji was brilliant because he repurposed garbage. Zhang Beihai was brilliant because he navigated a bureaucracy paralyzed by a madman's brainwashing machine.
Okay, but
The Wallfacers weren't playing a brilliant long game. They were throwing things at the wall in a blind panic. We look at the one-in-a-million piece of debris that happened to be useful centuries later, and we call it a stepping stone. What about all the resources wasted? What about the societal trauma?
the societal trauma was a byproduct of the looming extinction of the human race. You have to remember the context here.
I am remembering it.
The Wallfacers were given an impossible task: solve a problem that physics, sociology, and military strategy universally said was absolutely unsolvable.
So they panicked.
In that context, throwing things at the wall is literally the only rational approach. They were forced to explore the absolute extremes of human capability. the extremes of engineering, the extremes of psychology, the extremes of morality.
And they failed.
Yes, they failed. But their dead ends mapped the labyrinth.
Mapped the labyrinth?
Tyler showed us the limits of conventional military deception. Diaz showed us the limits of physical deterrence. Hines showed us the limits of psychological control.
Okay, I see that.
By exhausting these dead ends, they channeled humanity and Luo Ji toward the only path that actually worked: cosmic sociology.
Mapping the labyrinth by hitting every dead end at full speed is a terrible way to navigate, and I still contend that you are giving the system too much credit.
We survived, didn't we?
Barely. You mentioned at the beginning that the Wallfacers were meditators, but true meditation requires clarity and awareness.
Sure.
The Wallfacers were driven by ego, by a desperate need to be the single savior of humanity. Ray Diaz couldn't accept that his country's geopolitical strategies didn't scale to interstellar war.
That's fair.
Bill Hines couldn't accept that the human mind couldn't just be programmed like a computer to ignore reality. Their failures weren't noble sacrifices, they were the inevitable collapse of hubris.
Hubris, perhaps, but a necessary hubris.
Necessary? Really?
Yes. If they hadn't possessed that massive ego, they would never have commanded the resources necessary to leave anything behind. Diaz needed the ego of a dictator to demand 1 million stellar bombs.
He didn't even get 1 million.
If he had asked for 10, the infrastructure wouldn't have been there for Luigi or Thomas Wade.
Which brings us right back to luck. It is pure, unadulterated luck that Luigi needed exactly the type of explosive yield that Diaz was obsessed with. It is pure luck that Thomas Wade's clandestine physics experiments required the exact type of deep planetary shielding that Diaz built to hide his shame. We must not confuse historical accidents with strategic brilliance. To do so is to invite future leaders to enact horrific, reckless policies under the assumption that history will vindicate them through some unforeseen technological loophole.
I don't think it's about vindicating the morality of the individuals. It's about recognizing the mechanics of civilizational survival. Survival is messy. It isn't a clean, linear progression of good ideas.
That is definitely true.
Right. So, to summarize my position, in light of our discussion today, the Wallfacers' dead ends laid the track for the long game. They provided the essential technological and psychological foundations for galactic humanity.
Even if accidentally.
The crisis era forced humanity to sprint, and when you sprint in the dark, you trip. But those stumbles pushed us forward. The Wallfacers bought us the most precious resource in a 400-year war: time. And they left behind the tools for those who came after.
Well, and to summarize my view, we must evaluate history with a clear-eyed understanding of intent versus outcome. We survived despite the Wallfacers, not because of them.
A subtle distinction, but an important one.
Very important. Our survival came at the hands of individuals like Luo Ji and Zhang Bahai who subverted these terrifying systems, people who saw through the madness and opportunistically repurposed the leftovers. We must never accept the premise that totalitarian mind control or suicidal planetary destruction are acceptable stepping stones.
Survival at the cost of our moral clarity is a dangerous precipice to walk. Whether to honor the architects of those early, deeply flawed plans, or the opportunists who repurposed their debris centuries later.
I think we will. But perhaps that tension is exactly why the events of the crisis era radically altered the trajectory of human development.
Oh, on that we can completely agree. The crisis era forced humanity to confront its own obsolescence, and the responses, whether flawed or brilliant, completely reshaped what it meant to be human.
There is an immense value in analyzing this history through multiple lenses, evaluating that razor-thin line between original intent and ultimate outcome.
Absolutely.
The historical archives of the Trisolaran crisis are vast, and they hold many more secrets about the shadows cast by the Wallfacers. We leave it to you, the listener, to decide for yourself who truly saved humanity. It's definitely not a simple answer.
Not at all. But as you do, remember our starting thought. In a war that stretches across centuries, the definition of success shifts beneath our feet. Sometimes you really do have to build a universally despised, failed monument deep in the rock of Mercury today, just so someone else can launch a starship from it tomorrow.